But Juliana, how do I buy a pair of used shoes without getting screwed? Ooh! Hello, my friends. Juliana here, and welcome back to another episode of Shoe Eating Monster. And this week, we have a very special episode, which will hopefully be the start of a series of episodes that is going to eventually get you up to speed as to how to properly buy a pair of used shoes. As you guys know, I am the connoisseur of the Second Chance Shoe Society, which means that I have been buying used shoes to use while I'm running and then test them out and try them out for all you guys to see if these models are durable, if they're worth the money, and also for myself to see, do I want to buy a new pair of these? Is it worth the money? Am I glad that I only spent $20 on these and then I kind of like send them to the slaughterhouse more or less? So we're going to be stepping through my personal steps on how to actually buy used shoes, because I am someone who I kind of have like a semi-refined process. It's not an exact science, but you know, we're going to try our best here as to how I work through sussing out and figuring out, do I want to buy this pair of used shoes, and what's the best way to go about buying a pair of used shoes. So we're going to be breaking this down into a bunch of different smaller episodes, just kind of taking you through the steps that I work through mentally when I am looking at shoes online, and also when I am just kind of perusing the internet as you do, looking for used shoes to bring to my slaughterhouse. So here we go. Let's get to it. And so step one of our used shoe buying process, our how to buy used shoes series, is going to be know your feet. And yes, we do have some really great props here, including this piece of paper that I personally wrote on myself. Thank you so much. High budget production here. So knowing your feet. What does that mean? There's a lot of different parts to knowing your feet, and this is going to be the pinnacle baseline thing that you need to know if you are trying to buy a pair of used shoes, and also if you're trying to buy a pair of new shoes too. This is all information that you should be taking with you anytime that you are going to be buying shoes, and should hopefully demystify some of the kind of more mysterious parts of buying shoes, and hopefully get you to a spot where you can walk into a shoe store, you can buy shoes online, and you should be pretty confident, for the most part, at least 75% of the way confident, that you're getting the right size and shape and format of a shoe. So let's break down. We'll talk about how to know your feet. So the first thing that you're going to want to know is your foot shape. So do you have a more narrow foot, or do you have a wider foot? And that's something you can generally suss out from just looking at your feet. And I will preface all of this with, I feel like your best bet, honestly, if you are trying to get your feet sized correctly, is to go to your local shoe store. And they should, largely, a lot of them now, have those scanning machines like the Aetrex, which I used to use at the store I worked at. And it'll give you a 3D image of your feet, and then they can tell you, like on a percentile, are you a wide foot or are you a narrow foot? Do you have a high instep? Do you have a low instep? Things like that. So that can kind of be your secret weapon. I will say, pro tip, if they allow you to put in your email so you can get these measurements and results sent to you, do that. That's going to be very, very useful. Have them send you that stuff. But generally speaking, if you look down at your feet, you should be able to tell, okay, is my foot kind of narrow? Does it look a little bit more like this? Or is my foot a little bit wider and it looks a little bit more like this? Because that's going to dictate which shoe brands we're buying, and also it's going to dictate what width shoe you buy. Because the number of people I see who try to shove their feet into shoes that are either too short or too narrow is preposterous. It's too much. Don't show me that. I don't want to see it. Do not try and shove your feet into a shoe that's not the correct size and show me. I don't want to see it. That's blasphemy. Don't do that. So along with the foot shape, you're also going to want to take into account two things that I kind of already mentioned. The instep, which is the height from here to here in your shoe. It kind of measures almost like the peak of your foot And a lot of shoe brands have a little bit of a higher instep or a little bit of a lower instep depending on the brand. And we'll talk through the different personality types of all the different brands as we go along. But the instep is just the measurement from the top of your foot to the bottom of your foot at like its highest peak, almost right before it touches your ankle. So that's something that you're going to want to take into account. If you're someone who suffers from like tongue bite, like you're constantly getting tongue rubbing here on like this part of your foot right here, then you're probably wearing a shoe that doesn't have a high enough instep in it. So easy fix. We'll talk again about more brands and their personalities as we go through this, but taking into account that, the width of your toe box, and then just also the overall volume of your foot. So how big is your foot overall? How much actual mass does your foot take off? And I don't mean that in a negative way. That sounded kind of like a slur, even though it's not, but just how big is your foot? Is it small? Is it long? Is it short? Is it like a shallow foot? Is it a foot that's just like a little bit taller? You gotta look at your feet and you gotta figure out, okay, what shape and size foot am I looking with? For me, I have a little bit of a higher instep. I definitely have a really wide toe box. So I usually get either a woman's wide or a men's shoe. And we'll talk more about that in a second too. So get to know your feet, width, height, instep, overall volume. Get a good sense of your feet. And then most importantly, we're going to want to make sure we have the correct sizing on our feet. And this is kind of where the getting your foot fitted at a shoe store is really helpful, but you can also measure your feet at home too. So what you can do is actually take out a ruler and measure your feet and then go to one of the size charts that you can find easily by Googling like foot size chart, and we'll put one right here for you guys. There you go. And then you can figure out what size shoe you are. Here's what I'm going to recommend about shoe sizes. And this is what I found works, generally speaking, the best when you're trying to buy things not in a physical store and you can't physically try them on ahead of time. Use European sizing. Please use European sizing, because American sizing is all over the place. I am like a 9 in Hokas. I am like a 9.5 in Topos and Ultras. I am like a 10 in Diodora. I am usually like a 9, but sometimes a 9.5 in Asics. But the sizing for the regular Americanized shoe sizes are not standardized between brands. But if you look at all these shoe sizes across brands, for me, they're pretty much all a 41. Even though the American sizing is all over the place, the European sizing is consistent because they use millimeters to actually measure out an actual like length of your foot, and that's where you're able to actually get some consistency. So, pro tip. If you're trying to buy shoes online, please use European sizing. Find out your European shoe size, measure your feet, or have someone at a running shoe store or otherwise measure your feet and find out your European shoe sizing. Right? Right. Okay, let's quickly bop back over and talk about the width of shoes, just because I know sometimes people get a little bit hung up with how wide shoes are, how narrow shoes are. You know, people get kind of like obsessive about how wide their shoes are. But pro tip, if you're someone like myself who has a little bit of a wider foot, a men's regular width is a woman's wide. So one thing that I love to do, because I have a wider foot, is I will choose the men's shoe over the ladies' wide, because the ladies' wide usually has like 2 color choices, and I'm like, I don't want gray or black. But if I go over to the men's shoe sizes, I can choose any color that I want. And there's usually a larger size range too. If you wear women's shoe sizes and you have a longer foot, switch over to guys' shoes. Unless you have a super, super narrow foot, which you might be able to find the guys' shoes in a narrow, which again would be a ladies' regular, because a woman's wide is a men's regular. You just have more options. You just have more options if you really just expand your brain. I always try to encourage people to think outside the binary and think outside the labels as well too, and just try on shoes. Like if I didn't tell you that this was a men's shoe and you put it on and it's super comfortable and it fits you exactly right, then just wear it. It's not a big deal. People are just so wild when it comes to things being gendered and not wanting to wear things that are like men's shoes. I'm like, I love a men's shoe. Big fan of a men's shoe. It's a nice time. I get to pick what colors they are then. I don't get stuck with this boring ass black color. It's great. So men's regular is a ladies wide. Keep that in the back of your brain. So far we've collected 2 like big tips from me, which is a men's regular is a ladies wide, and also that you should know your European shoe sizing. So on to the next section. The next big tentpole thing that we want to hit is going to be pronation and wear pattern. So your pronation is going to kind of inform your wear pattern on your shoes, and by pronation I just mean, do you hit the ground like this? Do you hit it to the side like this? Or do you hit it to the side like this? So if you're someone who has a foot that when you land on the ground is pronated, which means leaning inward like this, you're probably going to find that your wear pattern is a little bit harder on this side of the shoe. But if you're someone who supinates like this, you're probably going to find that your wear pattern, like myself, is a lot more heavy on this side. Or if you land right in the middle, maybe you wear right through the middle. It's not as important when you're buying used shoes if you know which shoes you're looking for. Where you supinate, the wear pattern is going to be a little bit more important, but when you're picking out which shoes you would like to purchase, that is where it's going to be important, because there are certain shoes that are meant for people who pronate. They don't have supination shoes. Trust me, I'd be wearing them. Definitely, if you're choosing a shoe, you want to think about that, but we'll talk about that at a later date. We're more or less just figuring out what's going on with your feet. Where the pronation comes into play when you're choosing used shoes and trying to see, is this shoe going to work for me or not, is you got to look at the wear pattern on your own shoes. You have to know where you wear a shoe through. So, for example, for myself, I'm someone who lands on my foot, and I land on the outside of my foot this way. So I typically wear through a shoe right through here, but because I land on my forefoot and I don't even touch the ground with my heel, if I have a shoe that I'm buying used and the heel is like really smoothed over and like clearly has been used a lot, but the front looks absolutely pristine, I can probably use it because I don't even use the back of the shoe. I literally don't even use the back of the shoe at all. So I know my own wear pattern, and I know that if you pick up a pair of shoes that I've worn, you can see that I'm wearing it primarily through this part of the shoe, and I need to find a shoe where the wear pattern is not hard on that part of the shoe. And again, like for me personally, if there's wear on the back of the shoe, it doesn't really matter because I'm not going to use it. But you have to know yourself. You have to look at the bottoms of your shoes and figure out, where am I wearing through these shoes? And you can tell by how smoothed over and ground down the lugs are, or the rubber on the bottom of the shoe. Because the spots that are smoothed over the most are going to be the spots where you obviously put the most wear on, where if you're buying a used pair of shoes, you want to make sure that that part of the shoe is in the best condition, because that's the part of the shoe you're going to utilize personally the most, and you really got to prioritize that. So again, if I buy a pair of shoes and the back is like fully smoothed over, but the front is in like pristine condition, I'm actually pretty inclined to buy that pair of shoes because I know I don't use the back of the shoe and I don't need it. And I'm just going to use the front, and the front is in great shape. So know your wear pattern on the bottom of your shoes. Last but not least, let's talk about what I kind of teased at the beginning, which is different shoe brands and how they fit, because this is something that is going to just kind of push you in the general direction, because we figured out how wide our feet are. We figured out how high our instep is. We figured out just overall approximately how big our foot is. And then we've also looked at the bottom of our shoes to see where our wear pattern is on the bottom. So that way we can know, hey, this is kind of where I'm looking to put the most wear and tear on my shoes, and also what I should prioritize when I'm looking for some used shoes. So let's talk about how the different shoe brands fit, because this will just kind of set you off in a direction as to if you'd like to check out some shoes and what shoes might be a good fit for you. These are just generalities, and each of the shoes within the different shoe lines definitely fits differently, but this is a good way to send yourself off in a good direction. So let's see what we got. So On shoes typically run a little bit more narrow all the way through, so that's something to definitely take into account. So if you have more of a narrow foot, On could be a good option for you. Solomon is also a good option for our narrow-footed friends. Also, we're going to throw Nike in there, and also Adidas and Puma. For me personally, you guys all know, I love Puma, but I wear a men's Puma. I actually go up a half size, and I also go to a men's. So Puma definitely runs pretty narrow. If you're going to be a little bit on the wider side of things, but not super wide, let's talk about a couple other brands. Now, Asics shoes are definitely known for being a little bit on the narrower side. They were much narrower years ago. They've definitely widened up the toe boxes a little bit, but Asics shoes, generally speaking, have a little bit of a wider forefoot to them and a little bit more of a narrow heel. But one of the biggest trademarks things with Asics is the high instep, which is that here to here measurement right here. So Asics is known for having a nice high instep in it. So if you're someone who has discovered that you have a high instep on your foot, Asics might be a good thing to try out. Also, along the same lines as Asics, we're going to have our friends over at Saucony. So Saucony is known for having a very narrow heel, but a nice wide toe box, kind of along the same line as where the Asics lineup is right now. And then if we're headed in the wider direction, but still I would say true to size, probably the most true to size brands I would say out there, we're going to throw in Brooks. They're a little bit more square. They're definitely, I feel like, a pretty true to size brand for the most part. And then along with Brooks, we're also going to throw in our good friends over in Boston, New Balance. So New Balance definitely runs pretty true to size, I would say, and also has a very square toe box. So Brooks and New Balance are kind of similar in a way, but also not really. But if you want a shoe that's a little bit wider, but not like a true wide, this is the way to go. New Balance or Brooks are kind of the way to go in that direction. Or if you have a foot that's just like a little bit more uniformly shaped all the way through, you don't have as much of what I like to call the sexy curve underneath here, but you have a foot that's just like a little bit more just like rectangular, which there's nothing wrong with either one. This could be a good place to go, or Brooks is also a really great place to go. And then if you're someone like me who really relishes in a wide toe box and also just maybe has a wider foot, this is where you're going to want to turn to brands like Ultra, which we have right here, or Topo, which is going to have that really nice wide toe box at the front and just a wider build overall to the shoe. So these are just, again, generalities about the different shoe brands, and each of the models within the shoe brand is also going to be a little bit different as well too. So definitely take that into account, but that should kind of push you off in a direction where you kind of know where to gravitate towards. And that's going to round out this episode of Shoe Eating Monster. So this is step 1 on how to buy used shoes. And generally speaking, it's get to know your feet and then also just kind of get a vibe for the different shoe brands that are out there. Next time we will talk about step 2, but before I send you guys off, I am so excited because I'm here to announce at the end of this episode that we have our first ever sponsor of RUNNAH, and that is going to be Mulcahy Family Chiropractic, which some of you have probably seen the episode where we had Dr. Bob on the show to talk about being a chiropractor for runners, and they have sponsored this episode of Shoe Eating Monster / RUNNAH, which is so wonderful. They're a local business here in Falmouth, Massachusetts, and I'm so excited that they have partnered with us for this episode. So go ahead and check out Bob and the Mulcahy Family Chiropractic group, and I'll put their information down below. But that is the end of this episode, you guys, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Shoe Eating Monster! Ah! And we'll see you next time for step 2! Woo! Thank you for listening to this episode of RUNNAH. This podcast is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Juliana Coughlin. Brought to you in part by the Falmouth Running Club and the Falmouth Community TV station. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram and on TikTok at RUNNAHPod, and you can send us an email at runnahpod@gmail.com. And our original theme music was brought to you by the one and the only wonderful Jeffrey Hutton. And keep up the great work. I'm proud of you.